Hi, this is Scott Richardson, the bench doctor from the Liberal Gun Club. And today I thought I'd take you through upgrading your Glock trigger. It's really not very complicated. It's pretty straightforward and it's very inexpensive. There's only a couple of parts you need to do a simple trigger upgrade. You need this connector and this little trigger spring. And these are pretty available from Lone Wolf and the Glock store. Zev Technologies makes them. There's several brands and kits available, for you to choose from. So, you can do a little research on the internet and figure out what's going to work best for you. These are actual stock Glock parts that I'm putting back in the gun because I have a really light trigger in it right now for target shooting, but I want to use it as a competition backup gun. So I want the original little stouter Glock trigger. But the process is the same whether you're putting in a stock one or upgrading it. So I figured I'd go ahead and show you how to do it since I needed to do it anyway. This is a Polymer 80 frame. It's not a Glock brand frame. The only difference is that it has a slightly different grip angle on it than the standard Glock, and this trigger guard's a little bit different. But beyond that, it's all Glock internal parts, Glock barrel, Glock barrel parts, striker, all those things are all Glock. So the process is the same regardless of whether it's a Glock brand or a clone. So real simple job. All you're going to need is your parts, a little punch, a hammer of some kind, and then I like to use this pin block that you drive the pins through, and they're captured within the block, and then it's magnetic. So oftentimes the little parts will stick here, and that way they don't wander off. And it's really handy with little spring-loaded things, so things don't pop out and fly into space. So the first thing we're going to do is, of course, verify that the gun is unloaded and the chamber is empty. Mag well is empty, as you can see. Gun is completely clear. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to take my slide off. And if you don't know how to do this, it's pretty straightforward. You just put your hand up under the beaver tail, use your fingers and kind of pull back just a little bit. Pull down on the front takedown tabs. Slide forward and off. Set that aside. We don't need that for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this pin, and this pin, and we're going to take out our slide release. Okay, and then after that, we're just going to remove this trigger body and trigger from the gun and do our upgrade. So what I do is I place my gun over the pin block, and I make sure the pin is over one of these openings. Take my hammer and my punch and just kind of drive them out. They shouldn't be in there very hard. They shouldn't take much force to drive out. You can just pull that pin now. Set that aside. Okay. Now we can do this upper little pin. Drive that out. The fatter bottom pin. Drive that out. Just pull those up out of your way. Okay, now from here, we can take our slide release and just slide it out of our way and set it aside. Okay, that's all the stuff we need to remove. Now we can just slide our Glock trigger out of the way like that. Set your frame to the side because you don't need it. Okay, so what we're going to replace is this piece right here. This is called the connector. And then we're going to replace this little spring that's down inside here. And so what you do is I take this arm and I you're fighting a little bit of spring tension against this spring. It's not a lot. It's not hard to do, but you just have to kind of do it by feel. So I kind of pull forward and out a little bit, and you kind of rock this thing out of that slot. So there's a tab right here that fits in this slot. So you're kind of overcoming the spring tension that holds that in place. So you just kind of give it a little twist, and like that. Okay, now we can slide our spring off like that. Remove our spring, set that aside. Okay, and now we're going to remove and replace this piece right here. This is called the disconnector again. So you can kind of just lift it out of there. It's not under a lot of tension, and there's nothing retaining it. So you just kind of lift it out of there like so. Set that aside. So now I'm going to take my replacement connector right here, and you take this leg and it fits down in this little hole right there, little slot. Just kind of slides in and it sets flush. Okay, it goes in as far as it goes, and that's you're done with that piece. So now we take our spring, and it's going to connect to this little opening right here, and it rides in this little channel. And on this piece, it's going to fit in this little opening and ride in this little channel. So it's pretty straightforward. You just kind of finagle it in there. You just kind of slide it up. Make sure it's captured in that little hole like that. Okay. Now you take this piece and you do the spring on this side like that. Okay. Now you kind of turn it and rotate that spring back into that little channel and do the reverse. You kind of pull and stretch that spring a little bit, get that arm back in that slot, and we're done. Okay. Now we just reassemble the gun. It's the reverse of disassembly. You take your trigger body and your trigger and you kind of put them in place, and you might have to rock it a little bit to get it in there, but it should go in there fairly easily, like so. Okay. Now we're going to replace our pins. Sometimes if you want to realign things, you can just take a little punch and reach in here and realign where those pins go. Put your pins back in the hole. I have to give them a little bit of a tap. So now we have to put in this large lower pin, but in doing so, we have to capture our slide release because the pin rides through it like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide our slide release into the first little slot on the trigger right here. You'll see a shorter one next to it, but we want the one that's closest to this side of the frame. So it just slides down in there like so, and then it kind of hangs over the side of the frame body right there. Now you can just take your larger pin and slide it through like that, and now it's captured in there. Okay, now the last pin we need to put in, you'll see this little spring leg on the slide release. So we need to kind of bend that out of our way so that this pin can ride over the top of it. The easiest way I found to do it is to put your pin in partially, take a punch or a little tiny screwdriver, and you kind of reach in and you pull down on that spring leg like that. Slide your pin in over the top of it like that. Okay, now you can see that little spring leg is under that pin. Give our pin just a little bit of a tap. Okay, so now we've completely reassembled our lower. You can now take your slide, put it back on the gun. It's reattached. I'm going to double check my chamber is empty. I'm going to pull the trigger, verify that the trigger works. Now I'm going to keep the trigger depressed, and I'm going to rock the slide, let it go, and check the reset. The trigger just reset right there. Reset. There you go. That's all there is to replacing and upgrading your Glock trigger. It's as simple as just removing 3 pins and replacing the connector and the little spring. All right. Thank you. I hope that's helpful.